How are you this afternoon, Tim?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you, Merv?
I would say that I'm motivated.
Yeah, you know what? There's something about the change of seasons. My studio here, my study looks right out on the mesa for looking towards the north of Albuquerque out to the mountains around Santa Fe. And it's inspiring. It really is. It really challenges me to keep focused on work.
Well, my wife and I are taking a road trip tomorrow up to Telluride, Colorado. So we'll be going through all of those beautifully turning aspens that we are famous for up here. So we're looking forward to those fall colors.
Well, it's so appropriate that you're talking about this because we are talking about motivation today. And we're going to talk about the motivation and using motivation and purpose, not just to get people to do things, but defining ourselves and defining the team. I have a really good story to share with you, which is very entertaining.
Go
Um,
for it.
we we started in a corporation in 2000. I was hired with about 300 different team members and project managers, and I was one of about 30 project managers. And they gave us a big rah-rah speech. And that rah-rah speech was, we're going to be just like another company, and we're going to transition, and we're no longer going to sell products. We're going to sell services, and we're going to solve problems for the world. Now, here's the cool thing. That's what they told us, and that's generally what happened. But there were certain people, one of my mentors was one of those, who said, let's do something with this. Let's not just think big. Let's think really big. Let's think of ourselves as an entire different direction on how we work together and how we build relationships in our projects and teams and also with our clients. Let's not think of our clients as the other side of the contract. Let's think of our clients as collaborators and fellow travelers. So whenever we went into a project, it's like we were changing our minds and saying, I'm not having a contract with you. It was still there. I'm actually with you along the way. And lo and behold, when they realized that we were there not to just make money, but to solve a problem with them, it changed the whole picture. And that's what I really started experiencing when I started realizing this is what motivation is all about. It's all about not just getting the work done, and it could be the same work, but there's a reason behind it.
So from what you just described, the fact that someone came to you and said, let's do this, wasn't the motivating factor. It was watching it light up in the eyes of your customer, if I'm understanding that correctly.
That was our motivation.
Yeah.
The
I
motive.
had a
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I have a similar experience. One of my last projects, a few projects back prior to retiring, the chief sponsor, the number one sponsor from our client side, was such an incredibly supportive person that our team wanted to make her succeed. And so, I mean, there was times we would work well into the night just so that she would look good the next day. So I can see exactly what you're saying, because the motivation wasn't that we liked the long hours. The motivation was that she, our prime sponsor, would look very good in front of her executive sponsorship the next day. And so that was motivating for us.
And you know, this fits in with so many other facets of the leadership mindset we've been talking about, like value, something I value or hold in high esteem. You know, Aristotle says value actually goes beyond holding it high in esteem. Value is truly something I'm willing to sacrifice for. I am so driven. I am so pursued to make this good. I want the outcome to be successful, I'm willing to forego a good dinner. I'm forgoing a little bit of sleep so that we can actually have this happen. And that's inspiring when you feel it.
Well, not only that is it suggests also for those people who get into project management or into IT for the monetary aspects or for the success that it brings. I think what Aristotle just said, what you just quoted from Aristotle, says that value isn't just in the things that we can acquire because of that success, but in fact, value comes from benefiting someone else. And I fully support that. I would not stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning working on a project because my paycheck might be a little bigger the next day. That would not be a motivation. So,
Right. Exactly. So
so
let's pivot into something tactical here.
sure.
Let's agree on a definition of motivation. What do you call motivation?
I would say it's, and this is gonna, I'll probably get some feedback from people on this one when they're listening to this, but motivation, I think, can only come from within. We've talked about this on previous podcasts, but someone can't necessarily motivate me. They can put an environment in place where I have a general desire or a willingness to do something, but that has to come from within me. So I think that's probably my definition. It's a willingness to do something for someone else or for the benefit of someone else.
So what you're talking about is motivation is a personal experience.
Yeah.
What motivates
Yes.
at the individual,
Yeah.
not at the group level.
Which, by the way, it's interesting in my thought process. If motivation comes within and it's not necessarily influenced by someone else saying be motivated, on the other hand, that same person can demotivate me by their actions. So it's, I think I can be demotivated from without, but motivated from within. That's how I define it.
Right. And that's exactly right. We can talk about demotivators later, and I'd like to. So what I've discovered and what I've decided for myself is motivation is a reason for acting or behaving in a certain way. And again, it's totally in alignment with what you're talking about. It's, I have a reason to do things this way, or I have a reason to complete this, or I have a reason to pursue this, or I have a reason to do it here. And you're right. These reasons, the more personal they are, the more I'm going to pursue those. And that's what motivation does. It says the more reason I have for acting a certain way, I'm going to do it. And usually I explain to my classes, these usually have to do with fulfillment of certain needs, right?
Yeah.
I need to eat. I need to get sleep. I need to feel safe. I need to feel like I'm part of a group. All of these Maslow's needs. And I've talked to my fresh managers, and I've said, you know what, if you cannot read the people, just think about Maslow's hierarchy. If you can connect the work they're doing with fulfillment of the need that they are demonstrating, they're going to do the work because it's getting what they need right now, what they perceive they need. A little respect. Maybe they're self-actualized and they have a big picture thing that they're chasing, right? Connect that to their work. And all of a sudden they have a reason to do it well.
Well, and I think as project managers, it goes probably, I think we're well beyond the need for food and shelter and safety. I think we are always at that self-actualization, that feeling of I matter. I need to be part of something. I think that's the part where altruistically, if I can be motivated to help that person in some way to make them a better person or a better worker or whatever it is, that really gets my juices flowing, if I can use that term.
Oh yeah, and and again, probably the easiest sources of motivation are twofold. Number one, engagement.
Yes.
I want to be involved. I want to be part of good work. I want to be connected with something that has meaning. And then there's something called relevance. I need to have personal meaning. I need to matter. In the world, I need to be recognized as someone or something that is relevant. And if you cannot figure out what else motivates people, just look back to the fundamentals of relevance and engagement. And then it gets real easy to motivate people.
Well, and that kind of leads to then us as project managers, besides being motivated from within because of the cause that we're following, it also leads to the fact that we as project managers can set up that environment or create the influencing factors that help the person we're working with become motivated from within. So I think motivation as it comes from within, but influence comes from outside of that, in a way that doesn't say, Tim, you need to be motivated. You need to get this. No, that's not motivational. But if I set the structure up for you to meet your needs for relevance and for self-actualization, if I understand that, which goes back to what you first started with, relationship, that all builds upon each other. And I can then, as a project manager, influence you in such a way that you are motivated to perform.
Let's talk about this word influence. This is even a more general, or let's call it vague, word. How do you describe influence?
I think it's just the ability to have an effect on someone's, let's say their behavior, maybe even their reason for being, their character, their whatever it is. But if I can somehow have an effect, a positive effect on them, I guess influence can be negative, but I'm speaking in positive terms. If I can influence them positively by having an effect on their character or their behavior or some sort of social development or career development, then that becomes influential to them.
That's exactly the way I look at it. I think of it as a manager who no longer does the work, and they have to figure out how to get that work done, not through their own actions, but through the actions of others. And so how do I create that environment so that, number one, people are motivated, number two, people are influenced, and all of a sudden, we get to that people first model that says, let's create that environment and let's create those relationships that actually make this happen instead of trying to force it to happen.
And I remember earlier in my career when I left corporate America and went out as an independent contractor, I had a major contract with a fairly large government organization back in the Midwest. And what was interesting to me was I was there to advise the client side on how to work with the vendor that came in to work on a project. Now, the contractual requirements for me in my advisory services was that I had absolutely no management responsibilities, nor could I manage government staff. It was just forbidden. It was absolutely forbidden. So we talk about influence. I ended up having more cachet with all of the staff that was assigned to the project than their own management because of what you just said. I developed those relationships. I put people first. And what was also interesting, a lot of times I did some work in the background, provided it to the person who was to present. They got the credit. And as a result, my influence became much more motivational to them. So again, I didn't have to have line responsibilities for the staff, but I had much more management effect, basically, because of the influence through the relationships.
Yeah, and you know, when we talk about power, power is sort of like the energy behind the influence. When you have power, you know, and rank, it sort of makes it easier to influence in a more direct manner. But as project managers, we often don't have that job title, and we're not seen as quote unquote true managers. Yet the ones of us who actually learn this trick of relationship and creating a culture, we often have an indirect power that's even more influential.
I remember hearing a speaker on this several years ago. I think did he call it afferent power? Does that make sense? Afferent, is that a word?
I'm going to have to look it up. Yes, it
Yeah,
is. Yes, it is. I'm going to have to look that up, though.
but that was the thought. You don't have direct line responsibility. Therefore, you don't have power over their career, power over their paycheck. But in many ways, influentially, you have power over their self-esteem that results in better career and better paycheck.
Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible, yeah.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about something we never have a chance to talk about. Project managers, as a rule, work in isolation. And I talk on and on and on in my classes and in webinars and seminars about the fact that we need to create a community of trusted advisors. We need to have people that we can complain to, as well as we can actually problem solve with. Now, since we work generally in isolation, we don't have a lot of motivators ourselves. What do you use and what do you do to self-motivate?
Well, the trusted advisor certainly is one of the things that I use, particularly in mentorship. Probably in every project that I've worked on, I have developed strong mentorship. Now, again, you have to, you know, the human nature says you always have to be a little careful on what you divulge or share, right? So even though you develop a trusted relationship, you never know when something goes sour, and that can be used to hurt you or to basically malign you at some point. Not that that happens a lot, but it's always something to be aware of. But the very first thing I do is I find that trusted relationship, someone that I can bounce ideas off of. I tend not to be a complainer or that sort of thing anyway, but if I can bounce ideas, bounce thoughts, bounce concerns off of someone who's been there, done that, I find that that's one of the things that when I get the feedback, I bring it within myself and then motivate myself from that, saying, now I have a way forward from something I couldn't see before.
Yeah, I was working with, I wasn't leading this project, but I was working with a data center project of a paper mill corporation. And they were one of the world's largest paper mills. And they'd been around for 150, 160 years at this time. So they were very mature. They were very confident in their corporate decision-making and structure and their culture. They were so smart. They took an executive admin, an admin to one of the CXOs, and said, for the next 2 years, you're going to have no boss. You're going to work as an advisor for the project management team for working on this data center. They're going to be your focus for any questions about the organization culture, but also for basically what is the behavior of the people inside this, the stakeholder behavior, and that by them actually formally acknowledge this person, it, number one, gave them a sense of power, but it also gave us that touch point that you use in mentorship. It was incredibly wise for this corporation to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I think let me answer with a second observation that I've had in terms of what motivates me. I mentioned earlier on the story about making that our primary sponsor look good. Similar situation. I was in a situation where, you know, again, in the advisory services that I was providing, working with them, anticipating. One of the things that I've done very well in my career is anticipate what's coming next. And working with sponsors who have not worked on large projects before, this may be their first. They're not quite sure what comes next until it hits them. So they always end up being in a reactive mode rather than a proactive mode. Or I shouldn't say always, but often they're in a reactive mode. I remember this one time I knew something was coming down from the federal government just because I had been on 3 or 4 of these similar projects. So I lined up, provided the documentation, built some status reporting processes. And when it hit this particular primary sponsor who felt like, oh no, now I have to do a lot of work and get this done, we were meeting and I said, no, here's what we'll do. And it was all laid out in front of her. When the lights went on in her eyes and she saw that her problem was solved before even asking, that delight in her eyes became my motivation to continue to do a good job for her. So it's just one of those things where I think it's the more altruistic approach to what we do as project managers.
There's an old saying, that says, you actually have a piece of knowledge that 10,000 people today will light up if you share it with them. It's like Christmas for them, and Christmas for them means Christmas for you. Yeah. So to be able to find these opportunities to either lighten their load or to just give them an idea that they've never had before, those light bulbs that pop are some of the greatest motivators. And as a self-motivator, I'm really into continuous learning, not because I want to be the smartest person, but because of the excitement and the wonderful rush of chemicals in my brain I get when I get a new idea or the pieces fit together. That's one of the greatest motivators I have, and why I still love project management. It's problem solving.
Well, and you hit one of the hot buttons for sponsors on the client side, actually even on our side, even on our executive level, is the whole idea of taking away some of the burden off of their shoulders. They don't need one more task in their obviously busy life. So if you can take that off their shoulders by you being proactive, and it does. It's a motivational factor. And sometimes I can make a game of it. Like, I wonder what I can help now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
One of my mentors, my early mentors in consulting, played these games all the time. And at the post-project dinner, we always had a dinner where we gathered the whole team together, and you could see him really quiet and smiling and sort of leaning back in his chair and thinking, okay, what can I take to the next project that I can use as a little experiment? Yeah, and that's what his motivator was. Basically having fun and creating Christmas for his team and his stakeholders all the time.
So we've been talking about the positive aspects. Do you ever think that there are times when perhaps we can motivate for the wrong reasons?
Boy, I've thought about that. So motivation is really strange. And let me give you a picture, okay? I was part of an organization, and we would get together and celebrate with the sales team once a year. And we would have like both sales and the engineering people would get together, and they'd eat meals together. They'd have seminars together. They would have discussions and workshops together. And it was also a time to hand out awards and that kind of thing. So they had promised us this for 1 year. And then they had also said, by the way, we're closing down the organization. And so we said, okay, we didn't mind, because number one, it motivated us personally to use these as professional networking events Number two, we didn't get any work done. And number three, we created a set of memories that we're going to carry with us the rest of our lives.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it was, again, it wasn't what our executives planned, and it went totally in a different direction. And they forgot that.
I probably, in keeping with our definition of motivation versus influence, I probably should have asked the question differently rather than, do we motivate for wrong reasons? I probably should have said, can we influence for wrong reasons?
But you know what?
But
that's exactly what it is. They made an influence that had unintended consequences, but it was truly a motivator, and it was the best get together between sales and the consulting group, even though it was the last. It was not just a real celebration, but it was also an experience that we would take with us personally.
yeah, I think, and I've seen managers do that sometimes with the influence. When I say for the wrong reasons, more for selfish reasons. And in doing so, because if I can influence my staff to say, come in early, and then I get the bonus that I don't distribute or share with my staff, that's pretty selfish. And I've seen things like that happen on several occasions. Now, when the staff finds out about it, the opposite happens in terms of motivation. They become demotivated. So
well,
it often backfires, but yeah, we can use it. We can influence and motivate for the wrong reasons.
Oh yeah. And it takes a lack of integrity. It really does.
Yeah, that's true. It does mess with your own ethics that way. But a lot of people, I hate to say this, a lot of people don't worry about that side of it so much.
Right. Exactly.
How about, go ahead.
This is exactly what happens all the time. When my actions don't meet my words, we get in trouble. This is what I found. When I said one thing and did another, my motivation was through the words, but by demonstrating, people said, he's telling us to do something, but he's going off in another direction. And again, it doesn't create so much anger or frustration. As a project manager, you create more often confusion and doubt. When you have that misalignment between actions and deeds, that confuses people.
Well, I think the other side of that coin too is maybe it's not done for nefarious reasons or selfish reasons, but maybe it's just, you get one of these guys that or gals that have seen this work, and then they continue to do it, and they continue to do it, and they can we do it too often? Can we influence or put influential situations amongst our team or amongst our client too often?
Yes, and the answer is yes. Motivation is just like any other reward system. If you over reward, the value of the reward goes down. And if you over motivate, or if you continue to motivate only for one specific thing, it's, it's like having the same dessert 5 nights in a row. Pretty soon the dessert is not as interesting as the rest of the dinner.
Well, I was just thinking, because I saw I think it was a YouTube video, part of one, a little while ago about Tony Robbins on stage. Now that guy he is insane in terms of his excitement and everything else from on stage. But could you have Tony Robbins on your project doing that every single day of the project?
No. You bring this up, and we were talking about this earlier in the week, and you used a word, cheerleading.
Yeah.
I love that word. It's like rah, rah, rah. And again, when you're a cheerleader, it does something that's really wonderful. It heightens the emotions. But the problem is the cheerleading is not the work. The cheerleaders in a sports game is not the game. The game is the focus, not the cheerleading. And that's where we get in trouble.
Yeah, and cheerleading in a way that influences as required is not a bad thing. but cheerleading always being, yeah, I can see the rah-rah. Yeah, that's not that. After a while, your whole team gets tired of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it no longer works. No longer works.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about motivators. What motivate us? We said earlier that motivation comes from within, and it's a personal experience. How do you discover motivators in other people?
Well, I tell you, the first thing is to be alert to them. I mean, if you're just going about your day not thinking about it, motivation and motivators can come into your life, and if you're not even aware of it, you're less inclined perhaps to respond to it. But I think if you're alert to it, looking for it, probably one of my best examples is I've had large teams that have been run by very effective team leaders, probably up for promotion to project manager, but they were not the person who motivated the team through their influence. It was one or two of the other worker bees who were always there for their team members, who were always responsive to their team lead. They ended up being the true influencers, even though they weren't the team leaders. And I, as project managers, would watch for those sorts of things and then call them out in a meeting and pat them on the back publicly for their influence of the team. Because to me, those motivators also motivated me.
Right. You're talking about something near and dear to my preferred skill set too. This is part of the soft skills, active listening. And active listening is not just picking up project data. It's picking up, basically the emotions and behaviors and the actions of the individuals. Sitting down over a cup of coffee in the cafeteria with your stakeholders or your teams, even just one informal one-on-ones, are some of the best places to figure out what makes people quote unquote tick, what drives them, what keeps them curious and inspired.
Well, and here's the other thing, and I've had some young people motivate me through their quiet, confident, competent approaches. They didn't have to be the one who are always the jokester in the meeting or the one who's walking around bringing people coffee. They were just quiet, competent, and friendly. They befriended the people, they helped them out, and then they went back to their own cubicles to work. But they were just there for people. And those were some of my prime motivators. I love those kinds of people. They don't look at anything for themselves. They look for the good of the team, and through their quiet influence, they're probably the best prime motivators on any project.
Yeah. There are general motivators too, like we said earlier. We have recognition, appreciation, we have rewards that can be motivators. We can use our emotional intelligence to expose those and understanding around that. Some motivators are job security. I want to know that my job is going to be there, and that's the safety motivator, right? Also, again, these surveys that I follow are saying more and more, and this has been a trend through the early 2000s, and they're not predicting it's going to continue, but engaging work.
Yeah.
A lot of people need to work on something that really, truly inspires them. And this can be some of the greatest motivators. It doesn't mean that any work cannot be inspiring. It's that as leaders, we have to remember that people are motivated when they're working on stuff that has real meaning to the individuals.
You just made me smile when you said earlier about rewards, kind of a tangible reward. I was on a project several years ago with a client who I, as an outsider, I as a contractor, was not allowed to provide any gifting, which for natural reasons makes sense. You do not gift to your client, but what I was able to do is, as long as I did something for like under $5 or whatever it was fine. So I remember one time at Christmas time, we had a huge party for all of the staff that was on the project from the client side. There's myself advising them and these folks. And what I had done was I had gone to some, I don't know if they were joke stores or anomaly. It's some sort of stores where they had these little kind of cute little gifts. And what I did was I matched a little $5 gift to the personality or to an accomplishment of each person. Now it took some time, took some thought, took some creativity in terms of how I would present it, but every single person was presented with some sort of gag gift, perhaps not really a, not an insulting gag gift, but kind of something funny. And everyone hugely, well, that was the biggest motivational event that we had for the entire year, because it was personalized and it was the thought behind the little gag gift was what was most important.
I use this in my face-to-face training too. I don't go face-to-face, not just because of the lockdowns across the last 18 months, but I don't travel as much as I used to do to teach project management. But when I did, the first day, when I noticed somebody nodding off at 2 p.m, and they always do,
Yeah.
I said, "Congratulations, guys. This means I get to put out candy on the tables." And I bring out 2 or 3 bowls of candy, right? And so what happened was, and this is to a class, everybody from that day on was looking for the person who was going to nod off first, because they knew I was going to be able to give them treats. And it was funny because unintended consequences meant that they were actually going to be an early warning system to tell me that we're at that point in the afternoon where people are going to be distracted.
That's great. So I was just thinking, as you were speaking, a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a little longer, but we talked about fulfillment in our careers. And now I want to get down kind of even lower than just at the career level, but can motivation be a potential or a catalyst for fulfillment as well, do you think?
Ooh, let's talk about fulfillment. First of all, what do you mean by fulfillment?
Well, I like it as my personal, and I hope this is consistent with what I talked about in career fulfillment, but I think my personal one would be a satisfaction, a contentment, some sort of recognition perhaps, but I think most of all, I want to be content. I want to be satisfied with where I am with my accomplishments.
Yeah, achievement of something desired.
Yeah.
Let's just call it that. It's I did something, and it's something that actually moves me forward. Okay. Yeah. And so, yes, this is one of the greatest motivators. This is, and in fact, we're hardwired. We have chemicals in our brain that are reward systems that actually give us a little jolt of happiness when we cross the finish line, or we get that beep on the phone. That's how we're hardwired. And actually, that's the physiological mechanism of motivation. But fulfillment even goes further. When we bring fulfillment out of that part of our brain in the chemical swimming pool and into our intellectual, we can say fulfillment allows me to fit in. That means I have value personally. I perceive that my work has value. I have value. And that's a powerful thing to actually enable in other people through influence, but also to do that for ourselves. One of the hardest things to do is to be an entrepreneur, because you're working in isolation, you're working as an individual, and there are times that you're going to have no source of motivation, and there's no way that you're going to get the energy to even get up tomorrow. much less that. So if you can actually break the work into small pieces, so you can actually say, I did something. I crossed this milestone. It may not have been 5 pages I wrote, but I wrote the greatest sentence I've written every month. And these things that you can use both as an individual and taking that back into the projects for the team. Yeah, we didn't get everything done, but look at what we did. We did this, and this is something for us to be proud of.
Well, yeah, and another way I can look at that is it's almost like an iterative process. So I see my goal out there, and I know that when I achieve that goal, I will be fulfilled as a result of achieving that goal. I'll be fulfilled on that task on that for that time being. So I become motivated within myself to achieve that goal. But what happens when I'm fulfilled by achieving that goal? That achievement now motivates me to go after the next goal. So it's almost an iterative cycle that we can get into.
So you can actually say fulfillment is sort of like achievement with purpose.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It means that I did something, and I did something that has value and meaning. I made it happen. I actually did what I committed to.
Oh yeah. I remember, and I'm trying to think of the book that I read it from. It was called something along the whole line of peak to peak, was the thought process. I don't know if that was Robert Schuller or an author who was fairly motivational in the way they structured their message. But what I remember very specifically is the picture of climbing to this peak, getting there, looking at the vistas all around, beating your chest at how wonderful this is, looking forward, and you see another higher peak that you didn't see it from down below this peak, but now you see it from the peak you're standing on. So then you go to the next peak. And so it becomes a fulfillment that way, because you are literally going from peak to peak.
And you know what? That matches what the great philosophers said was the true value and the true motivator in life. It's not looking at the result of your work, it's the process of the work. And that's what you're getting into. And if you can get into actually finding achievement, not necessarily in gaining something as an outcome, but actually being part of and being within the process of this progress. That's what we call true purpose. It's not that I did this, it's that I am an individual who continues to do this. It's part of who I am. It's part of my existence.
Well, you had mentioned before, and I know you plugged my little company when you mentioned People First earlier, because I do run a company called People First Project Management. But I think this also comes down to us as project managers. People tend to slot us into the cerebral group of individuals who run our lives by logic. But I don't think fulfillment is a logical thing always. I think fulfillment requires the emotional aspects. People over the Gantt chart, the people over the process, the people over the approved deliverable. I get much more. Yes, I love the fact that I can get a deliverable in on time, within budget, and get it approved by my client. But more importantly, I get my kicks from watching people grow, whether they're on my team or on my client team. That's where I get my fulfillment from.
And you know what? Project Management Institute agrees with you 150%. Number one, in 2015, with what? The talent triangle. They said, you got to know business and you got to know leadership and people. They said 40% of this exam, and this was in January of 2021, they said 40% of this exam is understanding people. And they also said that here's the training that we're saying that is recommended to teach people about project management. The first thing they teach you, how to become a team, how to lead, how to motivate, how to influence. That's almost more important than the technical aspects. That comes next.
Yeah.
but you get the people stuff first. And this is not me. This is PMI saying, get this in place. The rest of the stuff is easy.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense to me. For a long time, I felt, especially in the earlier years, that the people who got there, and I don't want to denigrate anything that PMI is doing, because I think it's a great organization. It's done wonders for our industry. But for a long time, I felt that people who were good at taking tests could get their PMP much easier than people who were less good at taking tests. And what I always felt was that was that people part that was missing, because if you hadn't had some experience at managing a team or working within a team as a leader, it was difficult always to present yourself as a project management professional. So now with this new emphasis on the people side, I think it much more rounds out the professionalism of our industry.
And you know what? It's a lot easier to teach.
Yeah.
Because you can stand up in front of a class and you can say, this isn't about memorization. This isn't about building Gantt charts and knowing all of these 19 formulas backwards and forwards. This is changing your mindset and perception. This is refocusing yourself. And actually, if you focus in helping your class change their mindset and their perception, it's going to help them work on the exam a lot better, because the exam doesn't test your memorization. It tests how you think, how you perceive, and how you behave in the work. And it's really, if you look into the details of the exam, it teaches the people side. It forces you to think and make decisions based on your understanding of human behavior, your emotional intelligence, and your self-awareness. And it's amazing that everything fit together when that talent triangle came into view, and a few presentations popped up on the PMI website. Yes, you're right. It started off for the first 30 or 40 years as a bunch of technical skills and tools. But that transition into understanding the human element is almost more critical than getting the work done, has revolutionized not just the work of a project manager, but the perception of what a project manager can and must be.
Well, and think about that grounding or that foundation now that those younger project management professionals will now have. So now you're in a project and you're dealing with the people aspects. Yes, you're dealing with the technical aspects. That is so important. I mean, the schedules and deliverables and all that is still important. But the way to achieve schedules and deliverables is through the people. So by putting in that foundation, then the influence, which results in the motivation, which is the basis of our podcast today, those just will come naturally as people understand, as managers understand people much better.
Now, get this. Okay, we're going through a major transition in our society. One aspect of this transition is post-industrialization into the information age. We knew it was coming, and we've seen that. We're right in the middle of it, and it's an upset because things are being automated, people are being replaced, and we don't know what's going to next. It creates a source of confusion and doubt and uncertainty. What better time than right now to arm our emerging managers and leaders to prepare themselves not just for projects in this realm of uncertainty and change, but work itself and life itself. So these are not just project skills or business skills. These are personal skills as well as professional. And to be able to be part of that is a great honor. Talk about a motivator.
Well, and think about this. I've been working a lot on advising clients on what types of information to put into their requests for proposal when they put a big bid onto the street. one of the biggest factors that all of my clients have been putting in now is something called organizational change management. We always had training, but now they're insisting on something called organizational change management, and they're insisting on the contractor who comes in to have a person in that lead position who's had several years of organizational change management experience. Because in a lot of my clients, and you'd be surprised at how this goes, a lot of my clients have staff who are used to, say, keying information into a computer system without even looking at the keyboard, right? They even know which key to hit when, and they just kind of punch away. Well, suddenly now, with the new systems and the organizational change management requirements, we're changing their entire job aspect in terms of how they put information into the computer, such that they can pay more attention to the person behind the form whose information they're collecting. Before it was information, computer, out comes a result. Now it's person who we're helping or who we're assisting or who we're working with that needs that attention. And that is absolutely revolutionizing some of these more clerical aspects of the job into something that's much more fulfilling. But we need that change management aspect. And that comes from those people who understand humans and who can therefore put the factors into place to influence them and to motivate them to do well at their job.
Yeah, from an information technology standpoint, we call this conscious design, right? You design a system actually that provides function and value, and you do it in such a way that it's natural for them to use the system in a correct way, and it's unnatural for them to use the system in an incorrect way. And so it makes their jobs easier. It doesn't take their job away. They're able to focus on the decisions, the analysis, instead of the tool work. Now, think about this from a project management standpoint. If we were able to do that with information technology, we can do this with business and make conscious design into the system and the jobs and the work corporations do. So it's natural and easy for corporations to do things correctly. And it's difficult and complex and unnatural for them to do incorrectly. And so this organizational change management all of a sudden exposes unique and new opportunities for us to build culture into our deliverables, not just the actions and steps of the work.
Well, when you and I broke into this industry several years ago, let's put it that way, our jobs were to make mundane actions faster and more efficient and more accurate. That was basically what we did in computing. Now, with the sophistication and with the introduction of artificial intelligence and fuzzy logic and all of those sorts of things, I think we're making a much more human-centric design to our computer systems, such that people are aided and assisted in what it is that they need to be fulfilled in whatever aspects of their job or their career, or just what it is and part of their life that they need help with.
And so we're talking exactly what Peter Drucker and W.E. Deming were saying. We need to transition from being skill workers into true knowledge workers. Yeah. We're actually working in the decision support, the control support. And it's not just we, it's the community we, it's the aggregate we. And we're bringing our teams with us. We're bringing our stakeholders with us and our sponsors and our executives, so that we're focusing on the reason and purpose, not the pushing of the buttons and whether you want to have, this radio button blue and that one pink. We're actually saying, this is why we're doing it, and the logic makes it easy.
With one exception. When my plumbing has a problem, I still want the skilled worker, not the knowledge worker.
Yeah, you have to have the skills.
Yeah.
You have to have the skills. You're total agreement.
And I'll pay as much for a plumber as I will for a computer programmer, because we need those skilled workers just as much.
Yes, yes, yes. So we've had a good discussion of motivation and influence. We've actually found purpose as part of that motivation and influence. And we've talked about not just the motivators, not just how to find them, but also self-motivation. Is there any concluding thought that we have as the role of motivation? Or have we done a good job?
I think we've done a good job, but I just want to arc back to what you said earlier, and that is to always be learning. I mean, when I am laid in my coffin, I'm hoping that my favorite book is on my chest, because if we're not learning constantly, we just begin to degenerate. I mean, I don't know what's the word. We stop growing, certainly.
Yeah. Ray Kroc of McDonald's. Ray Kroc said, when you're green, you're growing, and when you're ripe, you rot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Peter Drucker, he said that we should leave this world with 65% of our current work incomplete.
Wow.
We should. Yeah, he believed in legacy work. He believed that our work should be work that extends way beyond us being around to see its end.
And
if we're doing that, that's what we should be working on.
And I suppose that's true, because that's how we end up with companies that are around 200, 300, 400 years, because they continue to leave work for the next generation to work on. So yeah, there's always some sort of progress that we as humans make, and it's just a great way. But we talked earlier also, and if to round this out a little bit in terms of rewards and self-motivation, one of my motivators when I'm finishing a job is that I incent myself with a book that I'm going to sit in my easy chair in front of the fire and enjoy an evening. That is one of my greatest incentives. People may think that's boring, but it's a wonderful way to spend some time.
Oh no, that's the greatest reward. We have a real joy in sharing what we've experienced, like what we're doing today and what we know today. Yeah. But that incentive of continuing to create what we may be able to share in 2 or 3 years. Yeah, I'm with you all the way.
So I think one of the takeaways for young project managers today is never stop learning, and especially spend your effort and time on the human-centric part of your career as a project manager.
Yeah, motivation. The more you can learn about motivation and what motivates others and yourselves, the more influence you can have around it, even if your organization doesn't give you that power and influence. That understanding of human behavior is so powerful.
Well, I see we've reached the top of the hour. Where will we find you this week, Tim?
I am currently over at LinkedIn. I'm wrapping up a couple projects, so I should be out there more active. But if you ask me a question or two, I'm sure it'll get pulled back into these conversations as well as other conversations I'm having in the public domain. And you, Merv?
Same LinkedIn, Merv Jersak, or under my company name, People First Project Management. But it's interesting that you're absolutely right. I think several of our last few podcasts have been related to questions that have come to us directly. So that's a wonderful thing. And we love what we do, and we love answering your questions, and we love to engage.
Yeah, please. We're really pleased that you guys are sharing questions with us. And if you have questions, send them either through the YouTube channel or send them to us directly, and we'll bring them up for discussion.
All right. So until next time, we'll see you next week, Tim.
Thanks again, Merv. It's always a pleasure.